Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, college football fans across the nation and around the world. This is Tim May with yet another Tim May podcast. And as always, well, not always, because he's been the last couple of weeks. My co-pilot's been on sabbatical, but he's back this week. Awesome. You know him as Austin Ward. Awesome Ward, welcome back to the Tim May podcast. Welcome back into the cockpit, my man.
It's great to be back. I've missed it the last couple of weeks. I didn't even give you warning that I was going to be in Florida on the golf course last week. So I'm glad that you were able to fly it without me.
Hey, I just fly. I just roll without you. I mean, I was able to bring in an able-bodied pilot who has some international experience, Bill Bender. So we didn't get lost as we traversed through college football and the comings and goings, the workings. And we were already talking a week ago about this proposal about a 12-team playoff, and then boom, all of a sudden they revealed a little more detail about it. I'm talking about the college football playoff committee did later in the week, and so that kind of sat there on the shelf, for the last couple of days. But I wanted to definitely talk about it today on this podcast. I've also got an interview I did with Chris Spielman over the weekend when I was up at the Detroit Grand Prix doubleheader weekend up on Belle Isle in the Detroit River. But he came by along with Dan Campbell. Dan Campbell was basically the the driver start your engines guy for race one there on Saturday. And Chris came by, and it was like old home week with Chris, because I've known him since he was 18 and his picture was on a Wheaties box. You know what I mean? So I had a little conversation with him about just his new job and how he sees his role there, but also about a little bit about college football and the name, image, and likeness thing that's coming around. But we'll get to that later. I wanted you and I to really get into this proposal for a 12-team college football playoff. If in fact it wouldn't start, I think, until 2023. I think I've got that right? When the current, I think, contract runs out. But just once they really threw it out there and made it public, what was just your initial reaction? Then I'll give you mine.
That even though they finally agreed that they needed to expand beyond 4, that they still found a solution that I think will probably be the worst that they could have possibly looked at. I don't understand it from a number of fronts. So when you say what was the first thing I thought of, the first thing I thought of was the correct answer was either 8 or 16, and then they chose 12. There are a lot of other components to this, a lot of reasons that I think that way, and that splinters off our conversation into a bunch of different directions. But for the first thing I thought of when I got the release down there and was reading it on the beach in Florida, I was like, well, this sounds about right for these people, that they would still know that they had to do corrections, and then they would pick, I think, what, speaking for me, would be the worst possible solution.
Yeah, what stood out for me immediately was 12. Okay, that was like you. That means 4 teams get a bye. It'll be according to their proposal. And these are all proposals right now. You got to figure this is like getting a bill through Congress. There are going to be addendums and sweetheart and pork belly stuff added to it, before it finally, because it's going through another hearing this week, I think in Chicago, and then goes in front of the whole guys that run the college football playoff, which are presidents of major universities, the next week in Dallas. But the bottom line is what stood out. Number one is that it's the top 4 will have to be conference champions, and it'll be the top 4 rated conference champions from the final college football playoff rankings, and that leaves Notre Dame out. Jack Swarbrick, the athletic director at Notre Dame, pointed out, now nobody's going to be criticizing them for being able to get in without playing a conference championship game. But the way I look at it, there are going to be quite a few teams getting in without playing in a conference championship game the way it's proposed. But the other thing that stood out to me was, yes, you're going to have 12 teams, but there's going to be no limit on the number of teams that can come from one particular conference or one particular group of conferences. And so, if you just did the math from last year's college football playoff final 12, 9 of the 12 were from Power 5 conferences. And then you add in Notre Dame, which played pretty much in the ACC last year, obviously, lost the conference championship game to Clemson. And that left who? Cincinnati and Coastal Carolina. So this idea about the trickle down theory, there's not going to be a lot of trickle down in this theory. And you got to figure, when you look at the SEC, which had one, two, three, four teams in that final 12, actually in the final 9. The Big Ten had 2. The Big 12 had 2. But I mean, bottom line is the Power 5, the rich are going to get richer in this deal, because you got to figure it's going to be negotiated a much more lucrative TV contract, et cetera, than they've got even now, right?
Well, and that's also one of the I guess 2 big hangups there, Tim, when we're talking about will it get through, when will it start in 2023? Well, these people still continue to kowtow to the Rose Bowl and let them be the fly in every ointment when they talk about the playoff and moving forward, which is just insane to me. It's not. You've been there more than I have. I've only been there once. It's not like this one thing, this crown jewel, should hold up all the progress for the rest of college football. It's madness to me. The TV part, I think, will be much easier, because guess what? ESPN is going to get more inventory, and they're going to sell more ads, and there's going to be more attention from coast to coast, because this 12-team format and all the conference champions being in ensures that the Pac-12, which has had trouble getting into the 4-team field, the Big 12, which has come up short in a few of them, that every conference in the country has a chance to get in. Well, that's going to make the regular season more exciting and more reason for fans to get invested. That means more money for ESPN. So I think they're sitting there saying, whatever you want to do, you're going to give us more games. Here's more money. That part's easy. But the fact that the college football, powers that be, continue to, I understand why. Bowls have propped up their whole system for the entirety of the sport, and there's money for everybody, but they don't need bowls anymore. You and I have talked about this before, and that they tried to squeeze bowl sites into the hosts for the ensuing, quarterfinals, semifinals, and finals of this new college football playoff is insane. They're not relevant anymore, and they don't need to be part of this system, especially if that's going to make it more challenging to get the dates right, so that you're not stepping on toes with the NFL, so that you can have the max amount of attention, so that you can be done in time for players to make their decisions for the NFL. All these dozens of other reasons that I could just say, the college bowls don't need to be part of the playoff. They don't need to be part of college football at all anymore.
Well, they are. Here's the thing, though. College football is based so much on what happened 50 years ago, 100 years ago, tradition, et cetera. Right. And here's, and what they want to do is, like you said, they want to play the first round of games will be at the higher rated or the higher seeded teams. 5 through 12 will be on their campuses, but they act like they can't play the next round at campus sites because the weather will be inclement. I go, middle of December, there's no guarantee in the north you're going to get a great, beautiful 45-degree sunny day. You know what I mean? So they kind of like talking out of both sides of their mouth about not being able to host the next round, the quarterfinal rounds. But the reason they're doing that is because they're going to be propping up, maybe not be the right word, but 4 bowl games.
It is propping it up.
Yeah, over the New Year's Eve, New Year's Day, or maybe the day after New Year's Day area are going to get those games. Then I think the semifinals, I think are going to neutral sites, so to speak, whatever those are going to be. Probably still be affiliated with some bowl games, and of course the championship game, which will be played right now. If they don't have buys in between January 1, then still the earliest of the championship game is going to be played is going to be January 14, 15, somewhere in that area, right? But what I really don't like 4 teams getting a bye. This isn't the NFL. The top 4 teams, the best teams the strongest teams in their estimation are all going to get buys. They still have to win 3 games now instead of 2 in this old system, which has only been around since 2014. But that also plays into their hands. And, and it's funny because when we were talking to the guys on the teleconference, when they announced this, there was almost like snickering going on. Well, nobody's really going to probably end up playing 4 games, because they, well, why are you inviting these other teams? Why not just go with 8, like you just said, and have everybody start at least on equal footing? But going back to what you said, yeah, I mean, it's like you're building this new bridge or something, but you want to keep, you're talking about the bowl game deal, you want to keep parts of the old bridge as part of the new structure, and it may not be suitable for supporting the new structure. I mean, I'm with you 100%, but, they're slowly but surely blowing up the old bridge, right? I mean,
but and that's the problem, is that I think that this is almost a half measure. Like, you can't keep doing this. 12 is not the right amount. You either like 8 or you like 16. That's not a compromise to go to 12, because for one reason, it doesn't solve the problem that college football just had, which was arguing over 5 champions getting to 4 spots. Well, you're still going to have the same stupid, mindless debate about who's going to get the buys because you didn't account for all those leagues in that place, and it's an uneven playing field. But if you're looking at it from the perspective of, all right, well, you're just trying to get everybody on board so that someday you can get to 16. When are we going to have this conversation? It's already clear that 4 is not right, and we're going to deal with it for the next couple of years. And then you have this other half measure for some point down the future where you're probably going to go to 16. Like, what are you doing? I just don't.
They're placating. They're placating. They're bowing a little bit to the pressure out there. And the other thing, like Bill Bender and I talked about last week on my podcast, the national championship game featuring Ohio State and Alabama, the viewership from the year before dropped like 27%. I mean, these are the 2 of the greatest programs in college football history for all by any measure. And people were staying home because of the pandemic, but fewer people watched it, by a percentage margin, which is really kind of incredible. They understand that they've got something seems to be withering on the vine here, and so they're throwing, it's like hunting for sharks. They're throwing chum out in the water, hoping they get a shark here with this new format, and they might for a couple of years. But like you said, there's always going to be. See, I've always said there's more of an argument when you get to 8 about who should be number 8, than there is about when you go to 4, who should be number 4. There may be 2 teams or 3 teams who should be number 4. They're going to be 15 teams that think they should be number 12. Don't you agree with that? And number 2, but they're going to take the top 6 conference champions. The top 6 conference champions are guaranteed a spot in the field of 12. So, and of course, 2 of those will have to play in that first round of playoffs. But yeah, I just think there's, it's almost like you want to see it play out before you kind of make a judgment. But wow, this could really take them down a path of you're not coming back from. I mean, that's see, the reason I always like the bowls is the bowls did give teams a place to go and have a little bit of fun, if that's what you'll call it, their alumni, et cetera, to have a little bit of fun after a game. Because, like last year, I don't think there was that big an argument about who the top 5 or 6 teams were in the country at the end of the year. I don't think there's going to be an argument at the end of this coming or the end of the 2023 season who the top 4 or 5 teams are. But you want inclusion. You want to placate people. And this is what you get when you do that. You get this sort of playoff by committee.
But, and that's the question, Tim. Like, who are the people they're placating? They're placating the bowl organizers, because the number one thing that I heard, from people, reaching out or asking me about what I thought about it last week was like, doesn't this ruin the regular season? Like, this doesn't help the fans because they want the game to actually mean something. And so if you had stuck to 8, right, and 6 and guaranteed 6 spots, you have secured that it is meaningful to win your conference championship, and you almost cannot get in. If there's only 2 at-large spots, you have to win your league almost certainly if you're going to get in.
Yes.
Now, obviously, there would be the rare exceptions, just like there are now. But if you're trying to, ensure the tradition and protect the integrity of the regular season the way that we've always known it in college football, the path to doing so was by not opening up 6 more at-large spots. It was to make it as hard as possible to get in without winning your conference, which all that would have solved everything that they've talked about. Pac-12 can't get in? Fine. Here's your automatic bid. You don't have to worry about that. You can schedule aggressively, not aggressively, doesn't matter. You win your conference. Big 12, same deal. You've had problems. Here's your path in. Every game, from Texas, Oklahoma, all the way to the Big 12 championship game, everything will matter. You win the conference, you're in. You don't have to worry about a debate. It's clear. Here are the qualification standards. Bringing more selection committee, more numbers, more formulas. I know that's part of the sport.
Yeah.
They had a chance to make this easy, and they blew it.
Hey, the final 12 last year in order were Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, Notre Dame, Texas A&M, Oklahoma, Florida, Cincinnati, Georgia, Iowa State, Indiana, Coastal Carolina. Who's missing from that list? Pac-12.
Pac-12, okay.
You know what I mean? And you're right. I mean, the solution of 8, that gives you go with the 6 top conference champions, which would include the Pac-12. You got to figure, I mean, if you're going to go with 6, if you follow my drift, would have included Cincinnati. Then you would have had 2 at-large spots to give away to, like last year. It would have been Texas A&M and Florida. I mean, SEC gets richer.
And you're talking about so you said number 5 was A&M, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
no, excuse me, I left out a thing there. Notre Dame would have had to have been in this current in the rules they proposed. Notre Dame would not have been in because
okay. So let's say so Notre Dame is number 5 in this scenario. Let's say
yeah.
And people are complaining that there's blowouts in the semifinals, and they want to see Notre Dame against Coastal Carolina.
Yeah,
to help crown a national champion. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Coastal Carolina was a fun team to watch. Great story. We also know that Notre Dame wasn't equipped to compete at the highest level. So what are we achieving by having Coastal Carolina go play in South Bend in December?
Yeah.
What has that accomplished? Nothing.
It spreads the wealth, man. It spreads the wealth. Hey, what do you think? I'm just thinking, I haven't actually gotten to talk to Ryan Day, ask him about this, but, the bottom line is, the way I look at it is, no matter what, you've added another game, another high-level game, I'm talking about quarterfinals, to a path to a national championship after will have already played. For example, Ohio State will have played in a Big Ten championship game. Alabama will have played in the SEC championship game. And then you've got 3 more games you've got to win the national championship. I'm telling you, I just look at the wear and tear, man, on college football players. And, I'm getting into my committee member voice. Well, the only 2 teams will play an extra 3 games, or, well, you could have 2 teams, I guess, play an extra 4 games. They don't think those teams from the first 8, the first round of 8, which would be 5 through 12 playing each other. I think they don't even think those guys have a shot to win the national championship. But theoretically, you could have a college football team 2 years from now, play 17 games, get beaten that last one because they got beat up, on the way to the championship. And what did you get out of that except participation? But I don't know. It on paper, I don't mind. I wouldn't mind seeing an 8-team playoff, because that's what you're kind of ended up with right now. You got these buys, et cetera, and you got these first round games. But the games that are going to matter are going to be played on January 1. In my opinion. So why not just jump right to that? Because you've got a ranking system that would allow you to get there.
Well, and the part that I think we're looking at this from the team that we've covered for a long time, and how does
we've seen them get beat up? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, they're going to play a lot of games. We know that that's hard on them because they're under this format. It's almost unthinkable that Ohio State wouldn't qualify for the playoff.
Right.
Obviously, things can happen and things change, but the way that they're set up right now, they're not ever going to miss the top 12 for the foreseeable future. Okay, so you have those games built in. And what does that mean? Well, it means that the rivalry game in November probably not going to be highly relevant the way that it used to be, other than the bragging rights. And I'm not dismissing any of that part of it, but in terms of the national championship race, no longer really going to be that important. Maybe it would be for Michigan as they try and turn the tide a little bit, but Ohio State is going to be in position almost certainly one way or the other. So that's why I think we heard a lot around Columbus that, well, this diminishes the regular season. And for Ohio State, I think it will. For Alabama, it definitely will. For Clemson, same situation. But for, like we said, Oregon or Texas Tech, I don't know, just pull them out of a hat. Those teams have a much greater shot. From Iowa, for Penn State, this might be a lot more relevant for them and make the regular season more interesting. So that's the fascinating dynamic, is that for the powerhouse programs like Ohio State, like Alabama, like Clemson, this does help them continue to compete for national championships, but you're robbed of something a little bit on the other side, which is also why the Buckeyes are scheduling as aggressively as they are non-conference, so that they can remain maybe some fan interest when they're going to lose it probably during the Big Ten season. But that's the weird part. This is probably better for the overall strength of college football, and not quite as positive for the best teams.
Yeah. And they made that point, the committee guys made that point that this keeps a lot more teams in it, a lot more conference. Several more conferences are going to be in it in late October and November. Whereas, let's face it, Ohio State plays Oregon, second game of the year this coming season. The loser of that game is going to have a tough road to hoe to make the Final Four. I mean, it's going to be a long ways away, but one more loss by either one of those teams after it lost in that second game of the year, and they're out of it. No matter if they probably even if they go on and run the table and win their conference championship. So, I can understand that kind of thinking, but this also basically is going back what your original premise was. On the one hand, they're trying to still protect the bowl game. See, they're saying right now, I think the proposal is that if you lose in that first round of 5 through 12, you can probably still go play in a bowl game. Okay, we've already seen the desertions by players whose teams didn't make the college football playoff, right? It seems to be increasing year to year. And now, it could be a game plank they have to use, as these guys exit to protect themselves for the draft or whatever you want to call it, right? That's kind of like really going to be interesting. But you're still going to have bowl games, teams possibly going to bowl games after losing in that first round. We'll see how this goes, but that
will not happen.
That far-fetched.
And I think the COVID year is an indication of that.
Yeah.
Obviously, it was unique, and there were a lot of challenges. But the fact that entire programs were saying in advance, it's not worth it to go to a bowl game when the whole, previous 50, 75 years iteration of the bowl system was, hey, you get to go get some extra practices. Young guys get reps. You get one more game. It's a reward. Like, that would have been a year. We'd be like, hey, you get to go on vacation. And I know that you still had to go through testing and all that stuff. There are other factors, but it's not just players that are opting out of these bowl games. It's entire programs that are like, they're losing money. They have to guarantee the number of tickets and go travel and bring along boosters and pay for people to go to places that they might not want to go to. For programs, they are losing endeavors. They don't want to be part of that anymore. And I can't understand why there's that disconnect. Again, I can't understand why. It's money. But the schools themselves and the players are no longer interested in that because they're focused on the playoff and the national championship. This is the system and the path they chose. They needed to take it, honestly, because of all the problems that the old system already had. Yeah. This is the new reality. And as you said with the bridge, you can't keep trying to force what worked in 1975 into 2021. It doesn't fit here anymore. It doesn't work. And you got to let it go. Yeah. That sounds like a line from Top Gun. But I digress. To me, it's really intriguing also that what wasn't brought up, and it was
I think it was asked on the teleconference. I can't remember the answer, but I can't remember exactly how it was played. But if you ask a college football player to conceivably play 4 extra games at high level, because these will be high level games. 5 versus 12 is going to be a hell of a football game. Slobber knocker, I think, is the word that Hayden Fry might have used. But the bottom line is there's got to be remuneration, I think, very much talked about between now and 2023 for the players. The higher you go, maybe the more you should share in the proceeds. I don't think that why would that be hard to do? I don't think it would be. Give me a reason why that would be hard to make happen instead of going through the gift suite. That gift suite, ladies and gentlemen, or one of these players get to quote, go through the gift suite, end quote, before some of these major bowl games and pick out little prizes or, Xbox, the latest iteration of Xbox, or do they still make PlayStation? Has PlayStation made a revival? I can't remember. Yeah, but anyway, just give them outright, $2,000, $2,500, $3,000 for participating. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, the only reason I can think of is that the bowl executives who were cashing $1 million checks to organize one game a year, that would come out of their pocket. They don't get to get rich anymore. I just don't.
I think it's going to happen, by the way. I think it's going to happen. There's going to be a lot of pressure between now and 2023 for that to happen, but go ahead.
It has to. It has to. The Bulls served a great purpose, I guess, for a long time. But throughout, my career and being around players and coaches in the games and then going to some of these lower level bowl games when I covered a different program, they're rackets. And if you want to give television inventory, fine, do it in the playoff, do it with things that people want to watch. It's not even worth. I know people will watch the Boca Raton Bowl, but it's like a 1.2 rating and 1 million households. You can do a lot better than that.
Well, I am really in a minority. Because I watch almost every bowl game. I like watching football, and but I
don't think you're gonna as a diehard college football fan, I wouldn't say that that's a minority, but the ratings for those games are reliant on people betting on it. And, they're not even outdrawing, regular season NFL games. Obviously, they're getting dwarfed by that. I don't have all that, but they're not getting buku ratings or making people a ton of money. They're just filling a spot on the calendar where ESPN didn't have something to show on December 15th.
Yeah. So it's kind of like the Barker used to hear at the racetracks, they're at the gate, Cornell wagering next race, don't get shut out, you got to get that idea. But this is what's really funny is
it's not because you have 20,000 people going to these games. They're not going.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was going to get to. That's what Dan Wetzel, I think, brought up to them, arguing the idea that first and second round games in this new format, why aren't they at college sites? Because number one, the atmosphere, even if you played, they started talking about, South Bend in December, like I said, laughing about it. And I'm going, well, South Bend in the middle of December, how much better you have more of a chance of getting a big snowfall then. We've seen that. I know I talked about that earlier on the podcast here, but the bottom line is one of the guys shot back. If you're a fan of, say, Ohio State, and you think it has a chance to get to the championship game, well, that's a lot of money just to get to that game. I'm talking about if you're going to travel, stay in the overpriced hotels at that point, and the higher priced air travel, or if you're like me, you drive everywhere. But the bottom line is, you're not going to spend money on those first 2 rounds. Just remember, we saw that with Alabama when they played Ohio State back in 2014. And one guy said, well, we have this little thing, and I'm paraphrasing and probably making it worse than it sounded, but we have this little thing called a television, that you can sit in your living room. And I go, wait a minute. So this guy even admitted that this is a made for TV format. The fan, he matters, or she matters, but wow, this is inventory. There's a clamor out there for a more interesting college football playoff postseason situation, and by golly, they're going to deliver one. That really kind of got cut right to the heart of the matter.
Yeah, and it's another reason that there's an extra round that doesn't belong there. That's just, I can't say that I'm surprised by it. I've been watching these people make bad decisions for a really long time, and I understand why they make them, but I will not be convinced that adding in this hypothetical Notre Dame Coastal Carolina game would have really enhanced the product, would have solidified in the people's minds this was a true champion because that game existed. Yeah. I mean, I don't see it adding anything other than another game to watch, and people may be hoping that a Cinderella story happens, but I don't want to rain on that parade. But Coastal Carolina is not going to beat Notre Dame, Ohio State, Alabama, Clemson all in a row. That's just not going to happen.
Yeah, they've made it more open. They've maybe established a pathway for the other five. Although top five. I mean, theoretically, you could have one of those conference champions be one of the top four from the other than Power Five group. I always forget what their nickname is. And now you got the Autonomy Five. I mean, wow, that's pretty funny. I know it's been around for a little bit, but I think it's starting to catch on a little bit. But the bottom line is, I mean, you can join. Yeah, you can be in this. But boy, look at this stairway you must climb to get to the championship, and watch out for the little punching things that come out from the side, kind of like that little show, whatever that show, Ninja Warrior show, whatever it is. But hey, the last thing, just in your mind, what do you think these games will be? What do you think this, if it does happen, and you got to figure it's going to happen in some form or fashion, what do you think it'll be worth? I mean, what do you think it'll be worth to the college programs out there?
In terms of the broadcast deals?
Yeah, are we talking mega billions? Are we talking a few billion? What are we talking about?
Yeah, I think so. What was the NCAA tournament basketball deal, I believe, with CBS was for 1.7 billion, somewhere around there. Yeah. I mean, and people love March Madness and everybody stops for that, but they don't watch college basketball much for the rest of the year. People watch college football at an extremely high level.
Yeah.
And so to bring in the entire country, to hopefully maybe have a USC or get back in the mix and then get LA interested again, I think that the possibility there will send this skyrocketing. I'm not an expert at that when it comes to the dollars and cents, but if we're using the basketball tournament as a baseline, and there's way more games, so I know that it's not a perfect comparison, but you look at what ESPN, paying huge amounts for one Monday Night Football game a week. I forget what it is per week, but I think it might be close to, $1 billion for that, right? I mean, I think that's what they're paying the NFL to do that. I've got to think it's got to be in that ballpark. And so, again, that's when we've talked about this the whole time. We haven't even been dancing around it. Money is driving this whole conversation more than what they talked about in their feel-good press release.
Oh, yeah.
That not enough student athletes were getting the opportunity to compete in the playoff.
Yeah,
sure.
That's what I'm saying. I'm sure they dipped their toe into that pool big time before they even came up with this idea of 12. And the reason you come up with the idea of 12 instead of 16, what if Coastal Carolina upsets Alabama? In the first round of 16. Hamina. But then, like I said, you had Ohio State and Alabama advance to the championship game last year, and the viewership was off by 27% when nobody could go to the stadium except guys like me and you, and a few parents. So I think they're really, man, I don't know if the door is closing. I mean, I don't know if the door is closing or if it's just kind of going back and forth on possible denouement of people really caring about, college football national championship, except, people are very much involved. Like I told you a long time ago, Andy Geiger said, college football is a very much regional sport, and when your team's not in it, you sometimes you don't, it's kind of like when the Columbus Blue Jackets fall out of the or don't make the NHL playoffs. I haven't watched a whole game in the NHL playoffs since. You know what I mean? So you're trying to make it national or international a product that maybe is more regional in scope than anything else. And it is. The SEC region does root for his team just like the Big Ten region does. But past that, does somebody in Idaho really care? I think that's what they're kind of coming to grips with. Agreed?
Yeah. And one of the reckonings, as we've talked about with, attendance problems elsewhere in the country. Again, a lot of this stuff doesn't apply to Ohio State. When people are worried about engagement in the Pac-12, or the western part of the country, the viewership dipping there, and you look at Columbus for metered markets and the fact that 100,000 people are at every game, like, okay, college football is extremely healthy in Columbus, and it always will be.
Yes.
There has been declining attendance elsewhere, even within the Big Ten. And, Iowa's got I keep using them as an example. They've been a team that would have, in a 12-team playoff, they would have got in, they would have played. So how are you going to promote that fan engagement for the future college kids? Because, I can't imagine that they're that interested in the Pinstripe Bowl. They're not traveling. The students aren't traveling to it. There's no reward. If you don't attach stakes to it, I don't think anymore there's reason to get invested in it, right? You're fighting for attention with all these other things, and we're not going to sound like as old as we are to talk about the things that they're interested in. But the way to make sure that they're engaged is put a playoff in place where your team might qualify. Yeah. Guess what? Then you start following the team and you get into it, and all right, well, here's the stakes this week, and you actually make a playoff. Well, that's going to stick in your mind. You're going to want to see that again and again and again, and maybe it won't always happen, but you have to plant those memories for people to care about it. That already exists at Ohio State. That already exists at Alabama. It already exists at Clemson, and Oklahoma, Georgia. They're aware of the path and how you compete for national championships and that they can easily get there. Well, that just frankly hasn't been the case for a lot of other places, and you have to pay attention because you're going to have to fill the stadiums into the future. You're trying to fix the flagging interest on television, which I think there can be other factors in that. It's that last year's game was a blowout, and there was the fatigue from news cycle and all that. That's not my forte either. But this problem didn't just show up for college.
Oh no, it's been going, and that's that's why you end up getting a playoff, a BCS, and then a college football playoff, and right on down the line. It'll be interesting 30 years from now what they're doing. Maybe they just start the season as a playoff.
The one thing I think, Tim, that before I let you give it over to Chris Spielman there, is that it's just mind-blowing that we're talking about 8 or 16. Like 16 was already in place for NCAA football.
Right.
And teams were already playing 15, 16, 17 games at that level. Like, this has been available to them, a blueprint, for so long. And the fact that the highest level of football refused to go along with it when it was already working elsewhere, people at the FCS level, I can tell you, they love it. Like, you know how to get there. You win a conference championship. There are some at-large spots, and I know that a couple of teams have dominated, at the winning championships there, North Dakota State specifically. But it's clear, and people like it.
Yeah.
Well, why not try?
No, it's called ditto. You're supposed to go ditto, but it's like I understand rewarding the top 4 teams, top 4 conference champions. I understand a reward, but the reward would be you play number 16. You don't sit at home.
You get to play a home game.
Yeah. Maybe it's so that Alabama and Ohio State can better scout a team they have no idea about. They get to watch them play a game with everything on the line 2 weeks before. I always believe everything is built to feed the big guy. But go ahead, though.
And Tim, that part you talked about, the pageantry and the quarterfinal sites, because they're talking about the quarterfinals and the semifinals, 6 games, conveniently the 6 hosts that are already part of the college football playoff. If you want people to, who may not have watched college football their whole life, they're a casual viewer, let's say, if you're trying to bring them into college football, not playing a game in the Horseshoe or not having a game in Bryant-Denny, forget about the fact that Ohio State would make millions that they're not going to get if they're a top 4 seed. The reward is the bye. I think Gene Smith would take the reward of playing one more game in the Horseshoe and making $10 million, selling out that game in 2 seconds, and then putting the best damn band in the land and, the student section rocking and putting that on TV. I think he'd rather take that than, can I decline the buy and just play Coastal Carolina here and let fans go to the Horseshoe? I mean, that's a reward for them. To take that away from the quarterfinal, from the top 4 teams, when they're the ones that have some of the best atmospheres already. Like, come on. Yeah.
Best venues, best atmospheres. But that's not where college football is headed.
I know.
According to the steering committee. Well, hey, speaking of steering, that's a good segue. I was up at the Detroit Grand Prix doubleheader weekend for the Indy cars. They also ran an IMSA race up there, but the bottom line was the starter, the official gentleman or driver start your engines call came from Dan Campbell, the new head coach of the Detroit Lions. But tagging along with him was Brad Holmes, the general manager up there, and also a guy named Chris Spielman, who I pulled aside and had a few minutes with. I mean, everybody knows Chris Spielman from his good old days at Ohio State, All-American days at Ohio State, went on to the NFL, played for a long career with the Detroit Lions. I think was with the Browns for a little bit, et cetera. But, he got hired at the end of the year last year as basically a special assistant with the Detroit Lions to pretty much kind of like be an observer, be an inside worker from the standpoint of helping develop a winning culture up there. And, without further ado, let's get to my little interview with him because it was pretty interesting. And he didn't, like I said, go into great detail when I asked him about being the first real name, image, and likeness guy I can remember from college football when he was on the Wheaties box in 1984, but before when he was coming out of high school at Massillon, before he signed with Ohio State. And we'll come back and we'll talk about that a little bit. But without further ado, here's my little brief interview with Chris Spielman.
Chris Spielman, welcome to the Tim May podcast. This is going to be, what do you know, man? But I wanted to ask you, what have you learned about yourself just over the last 6 months working for the Detroit Lions now as a special assistant?
I guess the one thing that I learned was that I have pretty good insight into who I am and what I am, in that sense that I knew that I'm not qualified to be a coach, or I know I'm not qualified to be a general manager, but I am qualified to help know what it looks like when I see it. And so I guess humility in a sense, and also that how much I missed being part of a team and having winning and losing on the line.
Yeah, I mean, you've observed football your whole life, number one. Number two, even when you were in the talk show business, you were observing and stuff. But like you're pointing out, there's a big difference between observing and being in the midst of it, right? I mean, what is it you miss most? Just the planning, the camaraderie?
I think it's winning and losing, right? And working very hard to achieve something. And, I go back to the man in the arena quote. That's one that a lot of people live by, right? At least if you fail out there and greatly, so you won't be amongst the cold, timid souls that don't know the difference between victory or defeat. And so you got to take your shots when you have them. And the opportunity came up, and it happened so fast. Like, it happened within 4 days.
Yeah.
And I've always been a guy that if I had a shot, I took it and never looked back.
When you look at it right now from the inside out, how difficult is it to build an elite NFL football team?
Well, I think it's really difficult. First, you have to find the quarterback, right? And we'll see if we have one in Jared Goff. Then I think offensive line is always important, but it's getting guys to the key. And I've talked to Coach Campbell about this. And the key is, I think, from my perspective, when you have a true NFL team, is when those guys play for each other as opposed to just playing for themselves.
Yeah.
And when they start playing for each other and they have a fear not of the opponent, but a fear of letting their teammates down, that's when you get the best teams.
Yeah.
Now, there's obviously lots of things that go into that.
Oh, yeah. Well, I once heard Bill Belichick talking to Ohio State University football clinic. And he said one of the toughest things to do is to get 90 guys or 85 guys in a preseason camp, all fighting for the team, yet you know half of them are going to be gone.
Right.
I mean, that is a trick, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think that's where a guy like Coach Campbell, who's a great communicator, and a guy like Brad Holmes, our general manager, that understands what good teams look like, and so they know how to build that, and that's what they were hired to do.
All right, last thing I wanted to ask you, because I've been wanting to ask you this for several weeks now. Name, image, and likeness is about to become players are going to be able to take advantage of in college football. Everybody remembers you on the Wheaties box, but you got nothing for it, right? Except some maybe extra Wheaties boxes. But what is this going to do to college football, in your opinion? Is it going to be a good thing for players? I mean, how would you describe it?
I think it's a good thing, and I think I've always stated, even when I went through my experience a couple of years ago, I've always stated that it can be a win-win for everybody. Now, there's smarter people than I that can figure that out, but common sense tells you that everybody can win off of this deal.
Yeah. Can I ask one last thing? My calling card.
What would it be if you didn't say one last thing or another one?
You spent more years with the Lions than you did the Buckeyes. Right? I mean, where does a football player leave his heart? If you follow my drift, I think you leave it everywhere you play, like Massillon. I mean,
so I think that the best thing that I do, the best thing for me, is that I've had this ability or blessing that wherever I am, that's who I am, and I'm all in. And that's always been the case with me, whether it was from growing up in Canton and being a Massillon Tiger. I was all in on Massillon, all in on the Buckeyes, all in on Detroit, all in on Buffalo. When I went to Cleveland for training camp, all in. I was a Brown. And so I don't know if everybody can do that, but I somehow was able to just transition really quick to what I'm in. Because if I'm investing me into it, I'm going to be a part of it and own it.
Ladies and gentlemen, the one and only Chris Spielman.
It's true.
Thank you, my man.
All right, brother. Thanks.
Hey, man, I always love my little whatever moments it is with Chris Spielman, because he always leaves you with some kind of thought one way or the other. A little inspirational phrase he had in the middle of that interview was interesting. But, let's just get right to the point here, Awesome. I talked about the Chris Spielman being on the Wheaties box. He was already a marketable character way back coming out of high school. What would he be looking at in a name, image, and likeness atmosphere?
Wow.
I know I hit you sideways with that. Sorry.
Couple $100,000 a year, maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's, nothing to scoff at. Certainly not when you're still in college. And, I think I've been maybe a little more, you and I both have talked about this, with businesses not wanting to just fork over cash left and right to recruits, at least, and certainly and not every 18 to 21-year-old roster at the college football ranks. But certainly if you know it right and you have that name recognition, there's going to be opportunities for that. And, I don't know, like Chris Spielman to me has never been like the most relentless self-promoter. He's very good at what he does, but I don't see him trying to court controversy or views on social media. And that's where I think a lot of the money is going to come from, honestly, down the road. But, I mean, you're talking about the best maybe defensive player in the country at that time. There's certainly going to be some opportunities for you to
but I want to tell you something, man. Back then, I think you were 1 year old when he signed with Ohio State, right? 1984. How old were you?
Yeah, one.
See, I mean, he was a big name, huge name. Everybody knew who he was. There's a battle between Ohio State and Michigan just to get him, And I just keep going back. People think just because of the social media and the widespread media now that players are more well known than ever, and that is not the case. I mean, Chris Spielman was a national figure even as a freshman. Joe Namath, when I was a little kid growing up in Alabama, when he showed up at Alabama from Pennsylvania, and then 62, 63, 64 was their starting quarterback. He could have almost run for governor. I mean, he was that popular, and the popularity of, I think in some respects, some of the popularity of major college football players has been diluted by so much media availability now in the social media realm of things. And but yeah, Chris Spielman, Chris Carter, when he came along, same year, 1984, they would have commanded some type of, if not anything else, autograph sessions they could have lined up out the door because people would have lined up to get them. And so it's just interesting that the new wave of players is going to benefit from it. But you still got to work on. And I think Chris did a pretty good job of perpetuating the Chris Spielman legend during that time. He wasn't overt about it, but he had a way, about him that he said the right things, man. It made people kind of think football player, run through wall kind of dude, and people love that. They still love that. But and I think he would have been as high as anybody else on the marketing value during that realm. It would have been interesting to watch. But I'm curious to see if this bill gets through the state legislature in time for July 1. The NCAA is now fretting about it because, of course, they're still sitting on their hands because they're waiting for a national bill. And we've seen what national bills, like I said, the pork that's added to these national bills. What do you think? Time's running out here, right?
If they're waiting for a federal bill, that's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know any other way to say it. My prediction would be there will not be one on July 1, and we're going to have some extended period of chaos. I think there's a good chance that everything will be in place in Ohio. They're not going to let the Buckeyes fall behind here to also cut to the chase there. And
think about what these bills are saying, though. These bills, real quickly, these bills are saying they're having to pass basically a law that says when you're in college and you're playing sports in college and your own scholarship, that you will still have the right to go out and make money on your own name. Isn't
it crazy that
that's crazy? I had Luke Fedlam on and we were talking about, I said, why does there have to be a law about the reason, there has to be a law because it will keep the NCAA from not allowing you to do that. It's more about telling the NCAA what it can't do. That's what people are getting lost on this thing. This is a crazy time we live in. And, it was never your right from day one to go market yourself.
It was never illegal. You just play for the NCAA.
It's against their rules. Right. And, and organizations have rules for reasons. Even the NFL has rules of what you can and can't do to a certain extent, but it's crazy, man. And just to get some basic rights, sometimes you got to go and bang on it. But that's the way it is. Ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the end of another Tim May podcast. And I appreciate Awesome Ward rejoining me after a sabbatical. You can tell he was fresh, he was eager, he's ready to go. Did I describe that correctly, Awesome?
Recharged.
All right, man. Well, until next week, we'll see you then.